Welcome to the very second, or technically first if you count the first one as the pilot, and this is episode 1. For courtesy of our guest, we'll count it that way. So welcome to the very first ever Imaginary Game Club. Last month we talked about Off, a surrealist old school RPG made in RPG Maker by a Belgian developer way back in 2008. This month, we're talking about Zeno, an old-school beat-em-up surrealist fighting game developed way back in 2008. For everybody who's new here, the Imaginary Game Club is, of course, a monthly game club, just like a book club, but for video games, where we're going to be playing a new video game title each month, focusing on the older, more obscure games that you probably missed, that are shorter to play through because we all lead busy lives, that are easier to access. Last month's game, and also technically last year's game, welcome to 2024 everybody, was cheap as free. This month's game is currently on sale for I think $2.50, but is normally $10. What a steal. So it's as easy as possible for you to join in the fun, and if you want to make sure that you're up to date on the latest games that we're going to be playing, make sure you hop down in the Imaginary Game Studios Discord. Easy way to get to that is go to imaginarygamestudios.com and click on the Discord server link at the top of the page. There you go. Now, without any further ado, let me introduce this month's guest. Go ahead and introduce yourself, because I got tired of it. Now it's your turn.
Hey everyone, I'm Jack, or Desawind is my online pseudonym. But I'm a gameplay engineer, so I'm a game developer. I do gameplay engineering as my job and as my hobby. I've been in game development for a long time. I love it, all things game dev, and happy to be here, Caxed. I did actually try Off last week, and I just wanted to say...
What'd you think?
So, in the beginning of the game, the soundtrack's really cool. And then there's just a toilet sloshing in the background, and I could not stop laughing. And I was like, oh my God. I'm surprised the word toilet didn't come up in the last episode. Because you guys were like, oh, the soundtrack's so great. And meanwhile, I just hear like a toilet flushing in the background. And so...
When I say the Off soundtrack is great, obviously, because it's an older game and an older platform, the audio quality isn't, spectacular. It's not going to appease the most audiophilic connoisseurs of today. But what made the Off soundtrack great to me was how well it fit the material of the game and how well it created an otherwise artistically simplistic universe. And I definitely want to get to talking about the soundtrack in Zeno 2, but we will save that for later. I can also mention that the way we met was back in grad school, working on a few different game projects together, and those titles are definitely going to come up in our discussion of Zeno 2. So
great. And quickly, when you say Zeno 2, there is a Zeno 2.
Yes.
Not to get mixed up.
There is a Zeno 2, and I hope we can get to that too later on, maybe later this year, because this game definitely left me with some questions and some intrigue as to what in the world is going to be going on in the sequel. So to get us started off, let's talk about our initial impressions. We'll keep this part of the discussion spoiler-free. What did you think about this game, just on a surface level? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you enjoy your time with it?
So from looking at the art in Steam, I didn't know what to expect. I knew Caxed, you pick weird games, so I didn't really know what to expect at all. But I love the game. I thought it was super refreshing. I was very surprised by many elements of it. in a positive way. There's some things I didn't like, which we'll get to, but overall, I really liked it.
Yeah, it's an incredibly unique experience that I would describe as saying it wears its influences on its sleeve, but in a way that is completely different from the modern era. So at some point in the near future on the Cax Nova YouTube channel, you'll be seeing a full-length documentary of me tearing into this new genre of derivative gaming, a new one. But this, as clear as it feels to me where this game came from, it's still an incredibly unique experience that is not trying to just ape other video games of the era.
Mhm.
This is from a different time when you didn't just get Demonologist as Phasmophobia, but with a little side mission, or
Yeah.
Small World, which is just grounded but with not as good graphics, or
Yeah, it felt like they took the parts they like about different games and just made this game with their favorite things, sourcing from other games, but you couldn't really put your finger on what it was. That it was so unique. It was very unique.
And narratively too, not just drawing from other video games, but also the way the world is constructed, the way the story was told. There's a lot of really cool things to draw on, which isn't to say that it's a perfect video game. I also had some issues that we can get into once we get into spoilers, but the way the game is structured is that it's primarily a beat 'em up. It's a first person fighting game, and it's got a surprising amount of depth and complexity to it, given that just sneak peeked into your Steam playthrough. We both took about 3.5 hours to play through this game.
Yep.
Which it's very short, but I don't hold that against games these days. I really wish more games were shorter nowadays.
Thank God it was short, because I think it was I was very surprised once we finished. I saw your time played and my time played, and it was the exact same. And I was yeah. So I wonder if we had similar experience.
It's a very magical world, and I would recommend people check this out. So before we get into spoilers, why don't we go ahead and give what our ratings are? How would you score this game?
Yeah, so I using your rating system, right? I would rate it bread and butter plus. So it was bread and butter. I think it had a couple things going really, really well for it, but it was more memorable than just the regular bread and butter score. So that's my rating of it.
Yes, I am right there with you. I wish I could go beyond bread and butter, but the flaws are just a little bit too present, and the lack of production value is just a little bit too hard to ignore for me to push it for it to elevate to that next level of experience. So, but it is a very bread and butter great gaming experience. It's a fun game. It's an interesting game. It's an easy game to just pick up and play and experience. That I don't think it's, despite how weird it is, it doesn't fall into that niche category. I think there really is a lot here for a lot of people to get out of it. If you enjoy, obviously, if you like fighting games, if you like beat 'em up games, if you like shooters, if you like narrative games, if you like games with interesting worlds, it's all here.
For the price of a cup of coffee, it's definitely worth it.
For the price of a cup, where are you buying a $2 coffee these days?
I have expensive taste. I think it was $4.
It was $4. Well, what is it right now?
$3.70. Oh, okay, never mind.
The sale has ended, so it's back up to $10.
Yeah.
So maybe wait for when it's on sale if you haven't picked it up yet. But even for $10, I mean, you'll get 3-4 hours of fun out of it. And there is 2 components to the game. There is a single player story mode. Well, both modes are single player, so I don't know why I say that. But there is a story mode with cutscenes that kind of give you an overarching structure between the combat arenas and tell an interesting story between some very weird characters. But then there's also a challenge mode. I don't know if you played through any of the challenge mode.
I did not. I didn't know that existed.
It's there. It's on the menu. You can compete with your Steam friends if you wanted to. And I'm trying to think of examples of what comes to mind. And the only thing that's coming to mind is like Catherine or Tartarus from Persona 3, where they give you a little graphic that's a big tower, and you climb the tower by doing subsequent, more challenging arena fights. And there's no story there. It's just pure combat goodness.
I'm gonna have to check that out. That sounds fun.
It's pretty cool. Check out Xenoclash, especially because we're going to be playing Xenoclash 2 sometime later this year, I anticipate, because I definitely want to see where this goes, and I suspect you probably do too. All right, so with that out of the way, let's head on into spoiler territory.
Okay, let's talk about the nipples.
Let's start by doing just a recap of what happens in this game. So if you've at this point you've either played through the game yourself or you've decided that this isn't a game for you, and we're just gonna go through and kind of talk about what goes on. So at this point, I'm gonna switch over to the wiki so I get my character names correct. You play as Gat, G-A-H-T, who is a human man, as far as I can tell, who was adopted. I don't know that anybody in this game is technically human. I really don't know. But you're adopted into the family whose patriarchal / matriarchal figure is Father Mother, aptly named, from the crazy wilds known as the Corvid. At some point, right before the game begins, Gat discovers some secret about Father Mother that leads him to getting banished from the family. And as he's escaping from the primary city of the game, which is named, locations, come on, Wiki, don't fail me now, Halstadum, you are joined by Deadra.
Yes.
Who is I can't say damsel in distress. She kind of becomes that once or twice throughout the game, but she's the innocence of the world, who doesn't really understand the conflict brewing between all of these different factions. And narratively speaking, she functions as the user's point of view into the world, because she asks questions about why things are the way they are, and it's not super clear why she is as protected as she is and why she's so unfamiliar with this world that she lives in. But the primary force against you, chasing after you, is Remat, who is a daughter of Father Mother, who's very upset that you've broken away from the tribe and are waging this war against them. And so she chases you into the wilds, as you also encounter different factions like the Corvid, who are the crazy people in the wild, and I definitely want to talk more about them because they're super interesting.
Oh yeah.
But the game is also told in a non-linear fashion, where it's jumping back and forth between this storyline of Gat and Deadra running away from the city to training montages with a character, Metamach, who was Gat's mentor and one of the Corvid, as well as the events leading up to Gat's betrayal of the family and discovering the secret of Father Mother. And halfway through the story, you run into a character, Golem, who, based on the artwork, I knew there was a character named Father Mother. I thought Golem was going to be Father Mother, so I was surprised when that didn't turn out to be the case. But there's a character, Golem, that you run into at the edge of the world. So you've run as far as you can away from the city, and you've discovered that there's nothing else out here, in this wasteland, and your only recourse is to go back to the city and deal with your problems. And Golem is this mysterious figure who knows everything about you and has super special magic powers that aren't explained, and he tells you that he's going to help you fix things, but you don't know how. So you go on a journey, an exodus away from the city, and then you go on a journey back to the city, and eventually you confront Father Mother for the big twist ending.
Yep.
Drum roll, please. Da, 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 da. Father Mother is neither a father or mother. They're just a kidnapper of children, which...
Thief.
I saw the twist ending coming maybe not a mile away, but like a kilometer away. It didn't quite catch me by surprise, but what did catch me by surprise was the way they revealed it. I really did enjoy...
That was great.
the pig, because when they showed me the pig, like at that point I was already pretty sure that's what the secret was going to be, but I was not expecting it to be that Father Mother had stolen this woman's child and switched it out for a pig, and that the educational systems of the world of Xenoclash are just so lackluster that people believe that that's just a thing that happens to your kid.
And there is one part in the game where you see Father Mother, and there's a bunch of pigs around, and Father Mother yells, "Oh, don't hurt my children," or something, and you assume it's the pigs. If you remember that, and then that kind of hit me later on that no, it's the other people who were there were the children. And I didn't even know that was Father Mother at that point. I don't know if you did.
Yeah, no. The very first time I saw the character, I wasn't sure, because like I said, I was, based on the artwork, I thought Golem was going to be Father Mother. One
other thing you didn't mention is Daedra or Diadra?
Diadra. It's
another
spelled
child as well,
Deadra. So you pronounce it however you want. I forget how they pronounce it in the game. The voice acting, definitely one of the weaker points of the game, unfortunately. Yes, Deadra is also a member of the family. She is a daughter of Father Mother.
Yeah. At one point early in the game, they said father, mother's children, and it kind of threw me off course, because it took me a while to understand what was going on. I don't even think I still really fully understood, and that just confused me. I'm like, how many relations? Like, how far does this go? That's a very good point. I knew going into it that there was a character named Father Mother, and that's part of what drew me to Xenoclash. Is like, what kind of a story could you tell with a character named Father Mother? That's inherently interesting already to me. Yeah.
So if I didn't even know that, yes, this would probably be even more of a confusing experience, which is wonderful. Sometimes I like to be confused and weirded out and grossed out by my video games. Maybe I'm the weirdo, but this game does that in strides.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's see. As far as the recap goes, is there anything else that I'm missing significantly here? Oh, one thing that it does do that I thought was pretty cool is the loading screens.
Yep.
This is an older video game. There are loading screens. The way that it displays the loading screens is that there's a map of the world, and as you're going on your exodus from the city to the edge of the world, you fill in the map.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to actually see the charting of your journey in this cool, almost hieroglyphic-y art style.
It's like cave paintings, it kind of look like.
That's probably a better way to describe it. It's very ancient but unique. The most exciting thing about this game is the world building. So let's talk a little bit about that. What did you feel about the world of Xenoclash?
I'm going to be honest. I had no idea. You're talking to a guy who I watched the first season of The Witcher and didn't know there were multiple timelines till episode 8. So I was very, very confused. There were the transitions between levels. Some of them were very quick, and it was hard to pick up what was going on. Some of them were longer with some nice cutscenes. So I was just trying to put the pieces together, man, until the end. And it was kind of hard to follow along. Yeah, I saw the map. Did I know it was a map? No. Until... but actually, no, I did. There is one point in the game where you see that cave painting map physically on a map. And I was like, okay, it's a map. Like, it just took me a long time to put things together in this world.
Which I can confirm, the name of the world is Xenozoic.
Okay.
That is the world.
First time I've heard of that.
Xenoclash. I don't think they ever use that word anywhere in the game. So maybe that's filled in the comic books. But on the forums, the developers mentioned that Xenozoic is modeled after Chile. Which I've never been to Chile.
Interesting.
But
if Chile looks like this, I don't know if I'm ever gonna. Jesus. Model after Chile. Oh my god.
Feel a little bad for Chile right now.
I didn't know Chile was like that, but yep.
What I really liked about the world was, in my brain, it came from two places. It was a combination of Mad Max and Morrowind. It's got a lot of those same notes as, and I'm going to draw on Mad Max Fury Road, which didn't come out until like 8 years after this game. So what can I say? The game is ahead of its time, where you have this little outpost of civilization in an otherwise endless, expansive wasteland. And the story structure is very similar too, just like in Mad Max Fury Road. They go on a quest away from the city and then eventually just have to come back to the city. Even though the city is a really crummy, gross, disgusting place to be, away from the city is even just worse than that. So it's not a very optimistic land. It's a place where everybody is doing what they can to get by. But then in terms of the architecture and the materials used to build their structures, I got Morrowind vibes from it. And that's from the creature design too, where things are just kind of gross, brown, green, pale reds.
And that I also got many Morrowind vibes. Also Kenshi. It felt very Kenshi-ish.
Yes.
Just from that brown in Morrowind, they use a lot of like shells in their architecture, like the chitin and stuff like that. You saw a lot of that in this game. There's a lot of sand. It's very sandy and
yes,
very pointy. The geometry is very pointy. So I got a lot of,
and that's not even just talking about low poly. I mean, it is an older game, so obviously, that. But just
this is unrelated to the nipples I was talking about earlier. Just very pointy and very. It felt old. It looked like the game was older, but the game played very modern. It was very interesting. I was very surprised.
Kenshi came out in 2013, like 4 or 5 years after this game, and Mad Max Fury Road came out in like 2016, like 8 years after this game. So all the things that the game is reminding me of are much later than this game. It really was ahead of its time for what it was, and it's still, even despite the fact that those other games came out there. Like in the off episode, I was talking about my Dune complex, where I just can't read the Dune series because when I'm reading it, my brain just fizzles out because I'm just remembering and picking out all of the things that directly inspired it as I'm reading it. Mm-hmm. I didn't get that here. I don't know what the magic seasoning was that made it that just different enough from all of those things. But I don't know. I loved it. I love this world. Is so cool, and I want to know more about Halstedom. Like even just in the skyboxes and in the distant geography of your little brawl arenas, because each level that you play in is relatively small. You can see San Francisco like rolling hills of just houses and abodes and adobe housing going on for an infinite expanse that just you want to learn more about it, and you want to learn more about the different factions.
And the creatures, the creatures were so cool, like very Morrowind-y again.
Yes.
And they were so unique. There were so many different ones. They did reuse a lot of them throughout the game.
Yeah.
But they were always in their respective biomes. Like they wouldn't put one of those rabbits in that end world area, for example. Like they fit very well. It was a very, I also got Star Wars vibes, how in Star Wars there's just a bunch of different creatures living together, cohabitating. I got a little bit of that too, and it was
you get some Mos Eisley Cantina vibes in there. But that's one of the things that I really, really appreciated about this game, is that it is not apologetic at all about the world it's building. I feel like if you were to get a game like this in the modern age, they would feel the need to justify and explain how and why and where all of these different creatures came from and what each of their individual cultures are and what the names of the different species are. And this game does none of that. It's just like, hey, this guy's a pig man, that guy's a bird man, this guy has a metal girdle on and is chafing to oblivion, and it's okay. That's just the world you're in. Deal with it, scrub.
Oh man, there's some funny things. Some of the enemies, the more human-like ones, I'm picturing this like red-headed, very angular-faced enemy that you'd fight. Mm-hmm. And I just thought he was so cool. I thought so many of these enemies were so awesome.
They're super unique, and they fit their factions super well. So let's do a quick discussion of the factions. There's the family, who is the most normal of everybody there, sort of.
Well, it's the most familiar.
Sure.
Because you are part of the family.
That's a good way to put it. They're the most familiar, which is different from the Northern Gate Gang, who protects the northern entrance to Halstedum, and you kind of have to make dealings with them to try and get closer to the family after you've been expelled, and they're put on the lookout by the family and told that you're not allowed back in the city, so you get into conflict with them. But they're not allies with the family. They're maybe uneasy neighbors, but they're more like the scoundrel faction, and I think they've got maybe bounty hunter type guys with them. And then there is the hunter, who is his own faction, a Birdman sniper dude, who this character,
he's cool.
He's really cool, and he epitomizes another one of this game's influences, which is Oddworld, where if you're familiar at all with Oddworld and you see the hunter, you'll know what I'm talking about, where his primary weapon of choice, he's blind and he's a sniper, and so the way he finds his targets is by chucking squirrels out at you on little parachutes with bombs tied to them, and the squirrels find you, and then he shoots the squirrels and they explode.
Dude, if he was blind, he was sniping me in the head. I don't like. I didn't get that. I didn't know that. I just know I was eating bullets from this guy. I died so many times.
That fight in particular was pretty tough, but I did get it down to a rhythm where I had to shoot a certain number of squirrels and then take one or two shots at him, reload, shoot a certain number of squirrels, reload, take a shot at him.
So you fight him twice. Did you notice, well, we'll talk about it when we get there, but it's the same hunter, right, that you fight twice?
Yeah. It looks like his name is Halim.
Okay.
And he is described to be a Corwood? No, wait. This is a different guy. Halim is a Corwood of the Free who desires to be invisible.
Oh.
I think that's a different one. I think that's a different one. He's not the hunter. Sorry. Right. The hunter's a different guy. He just didn't have a piece of artwork on the wiki to describe him. Yeah. He's an antagonist and a bounty hunter. Yeah.
That's the thing, is since they reused the model, or it seemed like they did, it's hard to distinguish between these two.
The hunter's most distinguishing feature is that he wears a crab mask on his face, complete with a bunch of crab legs to create a weird spiky crown-looking thing. But you only see him close up in the cutscenes. Otherwise, when you're fighting him, he's a sniper and he's always super far away. Mm-hmm. But very cool character. And then Halim is an example of the last faction of the game, the Corwood, or the Corwood of the Free. And the Corwood, I thought, was just the coolest concept for
it was awesome.
a faction, if you can call them that. The concept of the Corwood is people who don't subscribe to the beliefs or the limitations of the human condition. And that's why they're the Corwood of the free. They're free of their own humanity. And they live entirely based on whim. And so this example here with Halim, he wants to be invisible. And so the way he wants to be invisible is by removing the eyes of anyone he encounters. That's just awesome.
That's so cool.
And I'm not going to remember all their names, I apologize, but there's another example of a Corwood who just didn't want to eat food anymore, and so they just starved to death. It's just like...
Hey, man, I'd be a Corwood, you know? Just do whatever you want.
There's another Corwood that hilariously reminded me of Dr. Seuss. You know which one I'm talking about, who always has to walk in a straight line, no matter where he's going. And I had a good chuckle because you see him a couple of times throughout the game, and he always is just walking in a straight line. And eventually you get to a point where there's like a tree in the way, and he's just running into the tree over and over again.
You know what that character reminded me of? Well, hey, wasn't he like slugging around like an anchor or something heavy, or he had the metal?
He had like snowshoes on and like a giant cooking pot for a hat.
He reminded me of those turtle priest shell guys from Dark Souls. I don't know why, but yeah, he was awesome. Like there's one point in the game where you get back to camp or some place where I think Metamok is, Daedra might be, and there's that guy, and it's just like there was also another character there, and it just felt like I just have this gang of misfits. Everyone has their quirks, and it was really cool.
Yeah, like the Corwoods, they don't judge each other. They don't have any reservations about each other. They just accept each other completely for what their animalistic desires drive them to do. And that's what makes Metamok so interesting. He is the mentor character of Gat, and he teaches Gat how to fight. And so as you learn the mechanics of the game, you periodically go back in flashbacks and learn how to do all that stuff. But one of the cool things about the character is that you don't know what his weirdness is. You don't know why he's teaching you how to fight, because the Corwood don't have long-term investments. They aren't betting on, like, he's not giving you there's no currency exchange. He's not expecting you to do anything for him. He's not expecting to get anything from this at all. So why is he teaching you? You don't know. And eventually he just pulls out a grenade and explodes his own face off. It's such a cool slice of what this universe has to offer.
I had a couple theories about Metamok. I'm wondering if you also noticed a couple things about him. One, do you remember that Darth Maul-ish looking medallion that Gat wears on his like belt?
Yes.
Metamok had the same thing on his waist.
Okay.
Not only that, they had similar tattoos around on their chest.
Okay. So
I was thinking Metamok was like a part of Gat in some way. They were too similar to be different. Yeah. So yeah, I just noticed things between him and Gat that tied them together. Maybe they're tied together on a deeper level. I don't know, but why are they both wearing that thing, and why do they have similar tattoos? I don't know.
I assume that some of this is from Gat respecting and wanting to honor Metamok's legacy and what little way he has any interest in doing, because I think Gat has an appreciation for what the Corwoods are and why they do what they do, despite the damage it does to themselves, in a way that nobody from Halsterdam could. But at the same time, because this is a Mad Max-like universe, every single trinket has extreme value. And the only transaction that you ever see take place in the entire game, I think, is when you're buying a favor, when Gat is buying a favor from the Northern Gate Gang, and you give up like your backpack. And that's your in. And it's like, oh, shoot, how are you going to get another backpack? You can't just go find one. You can't just go down to your local Xenozoic Walmart and pick up a new bag, because there's no means of production for how these things get made here, as far as you can tell.
Oh, so maybe Gat, after Metamok died,
I
that
think
as a trinket. That's a good,
I think he scavenged his body for everything you could, because there's no like respect for the dead in this game.
Yeah.
There's stuff that you can use, so you take it, because if you don't get it. You're never going to have another opportunity to get that kind of stuff. But I know you want to talk about the nipples, so let's get Metamok nips out of the way.
Okay. Him and Gollum have the same rack. Don't they? I thought they were very similar. Like, they both had that shelf.
Metamok is much flappier than Golem. Like, if Golem makes it to, age 80, then he's gonna have a Metamok chest. Like, we're talking like Terminator Arnold versus like present day Arnold.
Yes. Okay. I guess they were different. Well, and Golem had lobster crotch. I'm not kidding. He had like a shell covering his crotch.
That's one of those details that I just really loved about this game, is how gross the characters were. A lot of the Corwoods especially wear these metal girdles and no pants. So on their inner thighs, they're just covered in blisters and scabs, and it's really gross and disgusting. And that's definitely not something you're going to see in the latest AAA title.
Yeah, in the next Call of Duty.
I mean, hey man, if I don't like to spend money on stupid skins for $30 in a game I'm not going to play that much of, but if they had a Metamok skin, if they had a Corwood of the free skin, all right, I'm in.
Oh, that'd be sick. I'm stuck with Lilith.
Oh, one level I wanted to bring attention to is the sewer level. Mm-hmm. It's a horrible cliche to put a sewer level in your video game. It pisses me off, I think, more than most when I get to the sewer level in a video game, because it's usually the worst level of that game. It's usually drawn on way too long. It's usually the ugliest level of the game that took the least amount of effort, and you usually fight the most boring enemies in the game, like a rat but big.
Is that why I don't remember the sewer level?
Well, the sewer level here is actually interesting, and the reason you don't remember it is because it's super short, which is excellent. So
yeah.
Bad sewer levels are everywhere. Like Oblivion, the entire intro of Oblivion is a sewer level, and that's the main reason I always hesitate to start a new save file in Oblivion, because I don't want to go through the sewers again.
That's the best part.
You like the sewers?
In Oblivion?
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh,
there's always something you could find in a weird corner in the sewer level, like in Oblivion. I mean, I found everything, but I like the intro to Oblivion. But if you're calling that a sewer level, I thought I was picturing what's that post-apocalyptic game where you wipe your mask, like you go on the surface.
You wipe your mask? That doesn't sound familiar.
Never mind. Forget that thought.
There's another game here. If that's not a satisfactory answer, there's another one called Warhammer Chaosbane. Have you played this one? It's a...
I have not.
It's an ARPG set in the fantasy Warhammer universe. I don't know too much about Warhammer. This is one of the very few Warhammer experiences I've had, just because I like split-screen games, and this is a split-screen RPG. So how can you hate on that? Well, I can very easily, because they have a sewer level, and this is the thing, man. This is the thing. You're in the sewers, and the game, you're in the city, like you are in many games, and that's your hub world. Mm-hmm. And at one point, you got to go and clean up the sewers. So you go into the sewers and you clean up some things, and you're like, all right, I cleaned up some enemies. And then you go into another floor of the sewers.
Okay.
There's a 2-story sewer system. What the heck?
Jesus.
And then you clean up some more enemies. You're like, finally. And then you go down some more stairs. And it's like a 4-story sewer system. The sewer system is bigger and more complex than the entire city that it's built on. Like, who built this incredible sewer system? How much poop do these people produce? How much Warhammer Taco Bell is being served in this city. It's just it completely takes me out of the game when you go through these sprawling, just incredible sewer systems that make no sense. Because like Baldur's Gate 2 is another example of a sewer level that comes to mind, where Baldur's Gate, fantasy RPG, set in like, you know, villages, and like, all right, there's some like medieval towns and cities with like, there might be some walls where the houses might be made out of brick, but it's a medieval place, right? And then you go into these frickin' sewers that are like, you know, 16-foot tall vaulted ceilings. Like, it's the most marvelous, like, people would live in those sewers rather than the dirty, danky dirt floor houses that they're living in.
You probably wouldn't. Have you played Vermintide? That entire game's pretty much in a sewer.
I was gonna bring that up. I haven't played much of Vermintide, but I bet that there's lots of sewers in there, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, even Diablo has a bunch of sewers, doesn't it? Like
it's everywhere, man.
Yeah.
Sewers are all over the place. And I think the reason for that is, one, because narratively it's easy. Like, where do you go? I don't know, sewers, I guess. And two, from like a production standpoint, you need a brick material, because that goes everywhere, or a stone material, and a water material. And you just turn the water material green, bada bing, bada boom, you're good to go. You got a full sewer level built out for you.
It's just a lot of these games, like the town, everyone's normal, but there's always some mischief going on underneath. And what's better place than a sewer to do that? So
how about like a cantina? How about like a hotel? How about,
it's too obvious. It's too good.
How about a cave on the outside of town? Even though I'm kind of tired of caves too, but I'd take a cave over a sewer any day. Anyways, I bring all that up to draw a counter comparison to the sewer level in Xenoclash, which was wonderful because it's just the way you get into the city. It's literally just one hallway of, this is how you get back into the city after you've been banned or whatever. And you're trudging through water. It's not like a 3-lane highway on either side of the sewage line. It's just one little winding hallway in dirty, gross water. And there's a unique enemy type in there that's not just a giant rat. It's a creepy plant monster that like swooshes in the water in the darkness where you can't see him. And then he pops out in lit areas and shoots poison blasts at you. And so you got to time your shots for when his mouth opens up. And it's kind of spooky because it's dark, like a sewer should be, unlike all these frickin' Oblivion sewers with all these lit torches everywhere. Who's the frickin' guards going around with all these goblins lighting these torches? I ask you. I don't know. Magic torches? This sewer is not like that. And it's also really creepy because the little bits of the wall that you can see it's the coolest material ever. It's a bunch of weirdly disfigured faces that have highlights from all of their orifices of bodily fluid. So like some of the faces have giant like nose drops, some of them have tears, some of them are drooling, because it's sewers. Really it's all bodily fluids creating the sewers, and that's awesome. It's cool. It's inspired in a way that you normally don't get at a sewer level. So for the 2 minutes I'm in a sewer level, kudos to you, Xenoclash. I loved it.
Yeah, I remember that wall. I remember the bodies and like almost frozen in the wall, which is really cool.
All right, so I got a gameplay programmer on this episode, so we got to talk about some gameplay. What'd you think about the gameplay?
First, when I first started playing, my question in my head was, what game engine is this? Right? Like, I was like, is this Unity? Is it Unreal? And then obviously the big giveaway was the options menu. This is every Source Engine modded game uses that same menu. And you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
So I was like, oh, this is a Source game? Like, how did they? This is a big revamp, it seems, from the standard Half-Life 2 deathmatch type. Base game, and a lot of the sound effects gave it away too. I'm very good at picking up sound effects that are reused in games.
Mm-hmm.
And the door opening sound.
Yeah, the door opening.
Yes, that gave it away. And
I watched some Red Letter Media on YouTube. They do movie reviews, and that's the door opening sound effect they use.
Yep.
And it's also used in Spy Family, a very popular anime these days. And it's so funny to hear it in all of these different places.
Yeah.
And the Red Letter Media guys, they make fun of it, where they call it out every time it shows up in a movie or whatever.
So that's another thing. There's like, it took me like how many years to realize that there are sound effects in movies that are reused in many movies. Like, for example, do you remember the Orange Rugrats movie? Like the Orange Rugrats, it's on a VHS. I don't remember. It's when Angelica loses Cynthia in the woods or something happens. I remember there's this wolf howl in that movie. And as a kid, it goes, ooh, right? And every time I've heard that wolf noise after that movie, I was like, they stole that from Rugrats. And then just there's so many sound effects that are reused in media. Like there's that wind sound, there's that sound of someone getting hit in that scream. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really good at picking up sounds, and I think it extended a lot more than just the door opening that gave it away. But that was the key one that sounded very Source-esque.
So the thing I really want to talk about in regards to the Source engine is a feeling of impact, because that's something that has always felt lacking in any Source engine game, whether you're talking about Left 4 Dead, whether you're talking about Half-Life. Just shooting guns has never felt as good in a Source game as it has in any other engine, which I did not feel in this game. The punching in this game feels really good.
Yeah. So the Source engine is really good at it's really good for first person games, and it's really good at making you feel a part of the game. I remember watching an interview with Gabe Newell, or it was someone from Valve, and they said that once they made the NPCs in the game, they added some code to have the NPC's eyes look at the player and have the head kind of look at the player. And they said once they added that, it made the game feel 10 times more immersive. And another thing about the Source engine is the physics are really good. And if you think about a game like Half-Life 2 Deathmatch, so in my undergrad, we had a class called Mod, where we had to take the Source engine and modify it and make a mod for it. So I've spent a lot of time in the Hammer editor, and which I think you would really like, by the way, because it promotes it promotes creating your own geometry within editor, which is kind of cool.
Oh, that is
you
cool.
You can create full levels within editor, texture maps, everything.
Oh, wow.
I don't mean to go a little off track, but
no, that's it. That's really cool. I kind of wish that was a more prominent feature in modern engines.
I agree, and they're adding it to Unreal now. I think in 5.3 or something, you can add your own brushes, which is what it's called. But yeah, the physics in the game felt like 60 FPS. It felt smooth.
Yeah, which the ragdoll effects are excellent.
Yeah, they're awesome. But but yeah, I agree with you. The punching felt great. The guns felt very weak and flimsy.
The guns were okay, yeah, but it makes more sense in this universe because the guns are weak and flimsy. The guns you get are muskets, dual fish guns, which are like little hand pistols carved out of baked fish skins, crossbows, and a grenade launcher, but not a grenade launcher, more like a crossbow that launches grenades. So it fits. They made the right kind of guns for this game compared to Left 4 Dead, where I'm supposed to have like the super awesome badass shotgun that's like doo doo doo, and nothing moves on my screen, and it just doesn't feel as good.
Pistols, although they felt very weak, They were actually my favorite weapon.
They were my go-to too.
Yeah, I kind of liked how they felt. Honestly, you had like 6 bullets, and you had to put. If you were against 3 enemies, you had to really be careful in selecting your targets because the reload time on these guns and the AI was really good. We can talk about that.
I can't wait to get to the AI.
Yeah, that was awesome. The combat was just, I really liked it. There's parts I hated, which we can also talk about.
Yeah. So on the one hand, I give the game props because I want to explore more of this world. And the animal inside of me is like, well, dang, why wasn't there more adventuring? Like, give me a full freaking Banjo-Kazooie level in this universe where I get to go run around and platform and jump and explore and find things and all that stuff. And this game doesn't have any of that. It's basically just a brawler, which to their credit, they get a lot of mileage out of the levels that they do, where it's not just punching enemies all the time. Sometimes you do have to walk from one place to another to pick something up and bring it back, and by the time you brought it back, something has changed, or certain segments you have to go hunting, so you got to go collect rabbits, and then there are different types of combat encounters, whether it's a boss encounter or a multi-faction encounter or whatever. So they do get a lot out of it, but I think that instinct that I have that just wants to do more with this world is probably not a great one, just because they spent their development time on the combat, making the combat really great, and they didn't feel the need to water it down with janky platforming and all that other stuff that normally you would imagine a producer would say, like, oh, well, you gotta have this, and you gotta have that, and you gotta have this. It's like, no, we're a punching game. And that's okay. You can be a punching game, and it is.
The game is surprisingly, it's deceivingly linear. I'm thinking of one level in particular. I believe it's the one where you meet the hunter, and the hunter, your sister's on the ground. I don't know what's going on with her. She's sleeping or something.
She's taking a nap.
And the hunter, you go explore a little. You come back, and the hunter's like, I want to fight you, dude. I won't hurt your sister if I can fight you or something. And then you go down.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's got a gun to Deidre's head.
And you go down that path, and it opens up into this area where you eventually have that hunter fight where he's on top of the big thing, the big creature.
It's a giant dinosaur.
Throwing bomb squirrels at you. And you turn around and you have this whole open space. But when you actually go to walk, if you walk too far, the game worms come out of the ground and attack you, and they hurt you, and they jump scare you because it's an unplayable portion of the level, but there's nothing really signifying that. So you just keep walking and you just start getting hurt. And it made me so mad because your screen would jitter. And so like that really ticks me off when a game does that. Put a fence and an invisible wall. I would rather have an invisible wall than little worms jump scaring me and killing me. It just made me really...
I'm going to have to disagree with you on that, because when I was a kid, one of my all-time favorite adventure games was Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy. And
classic.
A lot of the levels in that game either were on an island or took place by the ocean, and you could swim. And if you swam out too far, there'd be these gigantic piranha shark things that would come up out of the deep and just eat you in one bite, and you'd be gone.
Horrifying.
It was the scariest thing as a little kid when you're playing that game, and you just see the shadow coming up to get you, and you're like, oh my god, I gotta go back, get back. And it's the same kind of thing. And what I like about it from a level design standpoint is that you actually get to build the space as it would be, right? Like if you're gonna make a desert, there's probably not going to be a 16-mile chain link fence extending from one end of the desert to another. It's just a desert. And that's, to me, a clever way to try and guardrail you into the place that you're supposed to be without sacrificing the experience of being in that open environment. So I kind of like it. I totally grant you that it is, a jump scare. And you can call that cheap if you want. But you also know as the player, like, I know I'm not supposed to go out there.
Well, that's the thing is, in some parts of the game, they did it well. I'm talking about...
Sure.
There's one portion where they used fog as the area you can't go. And it was like, and that was good. But when you can't really see, or by looking at the area and visually not getting the clue that you shouldn't go there, that's what I struggled with, was when it wasn't so obvious to me.
They did have a couple of clues, to their credit, where the dinosaurs were in the playable part of the level. So you're drawn, typically people are drawn towards points of interest, they're drawn towards movement. So you got these giant animated dinosaurs and you can walk around there. There's, I forget if it was just a river or if it was just a lake, but you've got a water source. You've got a giant ruined castle in the middle of the desert to draw your attention. And you, at that part of the level, you are on a hunting quest. So you're looking for rabbits. And the first rabbit that I found, maybe I just got lucky, was along that water source and ran towards the playable area. Like, the rabbits don't run away from you out into the expanse that you're not supposed to be in. So as you chase the rabbits, you'll still be in that playable space.
That's true. I think this also was the level where I was still feeling out the game. I didn't know how linear the game was. And
yeah.
And so this was kind of like the smack in the face, like, oh, no, this isn't that game. Yeah. This isn't
these are all
KOTOR. This is, it's...
These are all very tiny little arenas. It's basically an arena brawler where the arenas are meant to feel bigger than they are.
And so, after that level, I got the hint. And once I was in that mindset, it was a little bit better. But that was the level where I realized that. I was going to say some other thing. I wanted to talk a little bit about mechanics. The sprinting, like you could sprint, and I was impressed in how they did that FOV effect, that modern. So they had modern elements that, like I've said earlier, made the game feel modern.
Yeah,
like Mirror's Edge-ish.
There's definitely a lot of Mirror's Edge in here with the combat, but again, this came out before Mirror's Edge, I think.
Yeah,
I assume so. When did Mirror's Edge come out? I'll check.
This game does not have the parkour. Just so the listeners are understand, it didn't have the parkour elements of Mirror's Edge, but it had the fist combat.
Yes. Oh, okay. It was very close. It's 2009, so Mirror's Edge came out just after this.
Wow, that's actually impressive that this came out before Mirror's Edge.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's like all these games that you're like, oh, this has to be ripping off of that, but no.
Yeah.
They ripped off this. One of the things I do want to talk about with the hand-to-hand combat, which felt like a relic of the N64 era, was C button targeting. Where you lock on to a target and then you can actually move your camera around, but it's still kind of locked in on that guy. So there would be moments where, like, I would be like, I'm punching this guy over here to my right, but I'm looking at the guy on my left to see when he's getting too close and I need to switch targets or whatever. And that feels like I'm playing GoldenEye and I go down aim, time, sight, and now I have to like adjust my little reticle on the screen compared to not just looking forward at all times, which I could totally understand if you would say that made you feel disoriented, but I really liked it. It made it feel more visceral and a little bit more tactical, more strategic in how I approach combat and how you're really constantly evaluating your position in the arena compared to what the other enemies are doing and how close they are to you.
I didn't utilize the lock-on probably as much as you. I felt that when you had more than two enemies, if you were fighting three enemies, it was very hard to... You'd have someone come in on the left while you're aiming at the guy in the middle. And I ended up just turning off the lock-on and I would just free ball it. Yeah.
So, all right.
So I found it actually kind of frustrating because you would tunnel vision on someone. I wasn't moving my camera much during combat. When I was locked in, so maybe I didn't realize that you could do that. But I would quickly turn off the lock on because it felt like I was too fixated on one guy while the other ones would just flank me and hit me.
Yes. And again, I kind of like the visceral nature of that disorientation of like, I'm punching this guy over here and somebody else just hits you from behind, because that makes me feel like I'm in an actual fist fight, because that's what it would feel like if I'm fighting a guy and somebody just thwacks you on the back of the head. Yep. You're not prepared for that. It just like comes out of nowhere. And they do a good job with, the sound effects aren't super high quality and a lot of it's stock, but with what sound they got and the animations that they got with like when you get knocked down to the ground and you actually, your camera rolls over and you see your hands get on the ground and push you back up, of making you feel like you're really in that combat encounter. And there are ways around it. So I can't avoid talking about the AI anymore because it's so relevant for how the combat plays out. The AI in this game, I'll just say, is really good. It's really way better than I ever expected it to be, and honestly, much better than most, if not every AAA game I've played in the past 5 years, I swear. I'm not making this up. It's really good.
I agree. And I think the reason is like, you can identify what the AI is doing. Like, if you have an enemy in the distance and you aim a sniper at him, he'll hide. He'll wait. He'll
the first time that happened, I was like, what are you doing? Oh my God, that's what you're doing? I have a gun and I'm aiming at you?
There was one that I was trying to shoot him and he was bobbing left and right, closing the distance. And then what's cool is if you drop a weapon, if there's something to pick up on the battlefield, one AI will go for it, the other one will swarm you, and then they'll just work together, and it was awesome.
It was so impressive and so cool and strategic. So you're talking about how if there were too many enemies, you stopped using the lock-on system. Well, the play style that I adopted is I would pick up weapons, use them, don't reload them, and then chuck them far away. So then an AI would go try to pick up the weapon and reload it for me. And in that time, I could then lock onto a different enemy and punch him. And then by the time he finished reloading, I probably would have broken the stamina of the enemy I'm fighting and have been able to knock him down. I would break the lock on, charge for the guy who was about to shoot me, and use the charge attack to knock the weapon out of his hands. And now there would be a free reloaded weapon on the ground that I could use. So you can take advantage of the AI reloading system. And it's like, that's so cool. I've never seen that in another video game.
Oh man, the AI really, like, it kind of felt like, so in The Last of Us, I loved dying in The Last of Us. That was one of the first games that made dying fun for me, because each combat engagement, I played on a very hard difficulty when I first played, so it felt very like gritty and real. And I would just replay engagements, and every time something would be different. And I kind of got that with this game. But there were things that pulled from that, though.
Yeah, it really felt like every combat encounter, there was something new.
The one thing I hated about the combat was the iframes. So
yeah,
if you knock someone down, you break their stamina, and they're on the ground, and you keep shooting them, they would take 0 damage until they got back up. And it made engagements last longer, and you'd get frustrated because you'd be wasting ammo on something that you couldn't hit, while someone else will come and hit you. And so that was a really frustrating point for me.
There is one exception to that, where if you just use the attack button with no equipment, you punch. But if you look down and attack, you kick. And you can kick enemies while they're down, but you can't shoot enemies while they're down, which I agree was a relatively frustrating part of the combat. And same thing with the bigger enemies. So there are like the tough boys that you have to deal with, and you can only hurt them by using melee weapons. And after you've dealt enough damage, they enter like a weak mode, and you can do like a critical hit and they get knocked down, and you can't hit them again while they're getting back up, which those two sets of iframes, was it really necessary?
Well,
I don't think so.
In that weak mode you mentioned with the big enemies, they heal during that. Did you notice that?
Yes.
They regen. And there's one point where you fight two of them at once. That was a cool fight. And yeah, it just added a little frustration. But actually, those bigger enemies, it was very rocks, paper, scissors. I remember one fight where you're about to fight one of the big enemies, and a hammer, which is like one of the only weapons you can use to fight these people, just falls from the sky and just spawns in front of them. It's like, use this to swing on this guy, and it felt kind of dull.
I noticed that. I know what you're talking about. Maybe if I had looked up, there might have been like Deadre up there, like chucking them down for you. I hope that's my head canon. I don't actually know that to be true, but that's my head canon of what was happening there.
Actually, that makes sense because she was opening the gate at that point, and so she was above. Yeah. So
it was a little goofy, but I still have more stuff I want to talk about with the AI. But encounter design wise, they did a really good job of not overstaying their welcome. Like, the systems they had enough complexity that they would constantly surprise you, but they didn't try and drag it out at all. They gave you exactly as much as they had, and it was the perfect length for this game.
It really was. And you beat it, you move on, and there's surprises. It always kept you interested.
They have a few different factions that use different weapons, and so one of the cool things about the AI is the interfaction combat. Like, that was another one of those moments where I was like, what? Yeah. They're doing this now? Where the factions are not friends with each other. So sometimes they fight you, but sometimes they'll fight each other, and you can take advantage of that to reload your weapons or do whatever.
One thing I wished was, it seemed like there was no rhyme or reason in the weapons that you might find in a battle. Like, I kind of wish it was more Resident Evil. Like, I found a lot of similarities, at least in the structure of this, with Resident Evil, how you have levels and you move on to the next section, etc. I wish that you had a little bit more control in what weapons you started out with in a mission, and maybe you could level up weapons between missions, because it felt like at the start of each mission, I didn't know what weapon I'd have. Sometimes I had a crossbow. Sometimes I'd have to find weapons throughout the map, which I really liked that. But it was hard to master something when you didn't know what you were going to get. It seemed like you were just getting weapons that were right for the mission.
You definitely were.
Whereas in some cases, you would have a plethora of weapons and huge battles, and you'd be able to swap mid-fight, and those were really cool. But I don't know.
I don't want to critique the game too hard for that, because this is the kind of game that would very quickly become you find your favorite weapon, and then that's the one that you carry with you through the entire game.
Yeah. And
you don't actually get to experience much of what the game has to offer, because at its core, this is not an RPG. This is a fighting game. It's about learning combos and figuring out when different combos will work in different situations. And so giving you the right weapon at the right time is a part of teaching you when those weapons will work and when they won't work. And part of it is then increasing the challenge level of not giving you the best weapon for the situation.
You're right. It made it feel a little bit more scrappy. Like you're using what you got to defeat the enemy, and
I much preferred
a little more hectic
the way that it is,
which was awesome
compared to I think what they would have done, what you would have to do if you could bring stuff with you between missions, is then introduce ammo. And in the game, any weapon you pick up has infinite ammo. It just needs to be reloaded. But in a world where you actually have to manage how many bullets you're carrying around with you for different weapon types and stuff like that, I feel like that would make it more of a shooter and less of a fighting game, less of a brawler. And it would also make it a little bit more cerebral of a game rather than a visceral combat experience. So,
yeah, you're right.
I kind of like it this way.
Trade-off, and they picked the right direction. It's in the source engine, so they could have went the other route easily, right? They had ammo, they had all that available to them, and they chose to go this other route actively because you have to break away from what's already there. So I like.
They wanted to make a punching game, and so they made a punching game, and that's pretty cool. And I feel like they got a pretty good amount of mileage out of what mechanics they had. Now, one of my problems with the combat, and I am not a fighting game virtuoso. I've played a few fighting games in my day. I think the first one that I really got into was Dead or Alive 3. I played some Dead or Alive 4. I played Persona 4 Arena. I had a really good time with that one.
Soul Calibur.
Played Soul Calibur. Again, my preferences are going to be weird. My favorite Soul Calibur, I think, was 3 because it had a board game mode where you could import custom characters and you'd like move them around from like different fortresses and have to fight people to take over the fortresses. And so I could play that split screen where we had me and a friend each had a different character. And so when our characters got into combat, then you would play that fight. And it was fun. And I really liked the Naruto Rise of a Ninja games. I don't know if you know those. Those are a mix of fighting game and RPG. So you actually like get XP points to unlock new combos and improve your stats and stuff like that. So that was fun. I don't typically play a ton of traditional fighting games. I tend to play more of the weirder ones that introduce other mechanics alongside them, like Xenoclash. But this introduces one problem that I have with both fighting games and hack and slashes, honestly, is the combos. I forget what the combos are.
Oh, I was going to ask you, like, how much of we had so many mechanics for combat. How many did you actually use?
Not nearly as many as there were. I tried my best to take advantage of as many as I could. In most cases, the most reliable source of damage was just the charge attack for me, where I would just sprint away. So then while you're sprinting, you're less likely to receive damage. And then your charge attack is more likely to both break guards and knock people to the ground. So it just made it kind of the best weapon in most situations, which is kind of a shame. I've never seen a fighting game that has been able to adequately teach me what all of the different combos are and when they should be used. And to their credit, I mean, they did a really good job with tutorialization. They do take you to these training sequences with Metamach and show you what all the combos are and kind of show you a situation where they're good. But I don't know, man. I just one time is not enough for me. I need like a review session. I need like a pop quiz and then like a final exam or something. I don't know.
I agree. It kind of felt like, I don't know if you've ever played Kingdom Come Deliverance.
I have not, no.
It's a very Skyrim, it's a fantasy game, but it's very Skyrim influenced. But the combat in that game is so complicated. There's like it's one of those games, kind of like Mountain Blade, where it has that directional.
Okay.
But it's not just 4 directions; it's the corners as well. So if you move your mouse up and swing, you'll do an overhead swing, etc.
I think For Honor does that too, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So that also fits in. But you could practice all day long, but once you get into a battle, it's scary, and I literally like get scared. I drop my weapon in battle and run like like once you're actually put in a stressful situation, you forget, unless it's built into your muscle memory.
Yeah,
you forget very quickly when you start dying.
Yes, 110%. I will to that style of combat's credit. You don't have to remember what the different directions do, but you know that there are different directions. So at any point, you can experiment and try what they are. I think a lot of them still run into the same problem where like, well, the overhead swing is the best one or whatever. But at the very least, you can remember what they are. I forget what the combos are. Like Should I do left charge kick? I don't know. I don't even know. Is that a combo? I don't know. It's not always apparent to me, and it's not always apparent when you complete the combo. Like one of the combos is just holding the attack button for 3 punches, but the third punch looks a lot like the first punch. So it just kind of feels like you did a 2-punch combo and then started another 2-punch combo, but it just stops. So,
that's probably the one so most of my engagements in this game devolved into me finding the pistols and running around and just shooting people from a distance. And so, and when the enemies would eventually hit me, I'd drop my pistols and I would be I felt like I wasn't well equipped enough to fight hand to hand because I didn't know I wasn't as good as I should have been. So I would just run around until I could get the pistols again. Like I mostly just did that.
Yeah, I understand the design philosophy, right? Like easy to learn, hard to master, where anybody can punch, but like there's a really high skill ceiling. Mm-hmm. And so if you really want to get really, really good at the game, you can, and that's super cool. But you gotta give me a little bit more incentive to get good at the system. And you got to give me opportunities to say like, okay, fine, I barely managed to beat that level, but I had to cheese my way through it. So give me a button somewhere that says, do you want to retry and maybe use this combo this time? That would be cool.
Yeah. If they kind of chaperoned or guided you into trying different things in different engagements, that would be cool.
And honestly, something like that might have helped with the pacing of the story a little bit because, so I love the world building here. I love the universe they build. I love the character designs. I love the creature designs. I love the structure of the narrative. Obviously, it worked really, really well for Mad Max Fury Road. That's a lot of people's like top 10 best movies of all time. Didn't work so well here because the storytelling was rough. Mm-hmm. The actual, like, the function that the characters played in the narrative was perfect, but then the actual words they said and the voice acting that was used to say it was not nearly up to par.
I swear you voice parts of these games that you suggest. I heard your stupid little the voice you do. I've heard it many times throughout this game. But I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh God. No, but I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, and it did start to, you saw the holes poking through where, all right, I get it. Deidre is the innocent princess character who doesn't really get what's going on in the world, and she's not really wary of all the dangerous things that could kill her, and Gat kind of is trying to shield her from that and from himself because he recognizes the grit and the grime of his own soul and doesn't want it to stain the pureness that is Deidre, whatever, right? You get it. You get the dynamic. It's a good dynamic. I like it. But there's just so many repeating segments of dialogue where Deidre's like, so what is the secret? Tell me the secret of Father Mother. Yeah. It's like, all right, And if I had played through the same level like twice to try and get better at the combat, then all of a sudden those repeated segments of dialogue would have felt like they had more room to breathe, and it probably would have flowed better.
There was humor in this game. Do you remember that one flashback where it was like, Armenia slept all day. That's just what she does. Or something. Do you know what I'm talking about? I literally spit on my screen. I was like, what is... So I thought this game was going to go that direction. I thought it was a comedy. I didn't know what that was or what... It reminded me of, have you ever seen Xavier Renegade Angel?
No.
We have to watch an episode of that together. I swear, It's so stupid. It's like, it has no explanation. You would just need to watch it with me to understand what's going on. I recommend any viewer, any listener right now, look up Xavier Renegade Angel. There's one part in this game that just feels like that, and it's just so stupid. But but yeah, a lot of the stuff they said was really weird. They were like cack. They definitely said cack a lot.
They had some of their own lingo, which I always kind of appreciate.
I kind of like when they create their own language and lingo, but yeah, I thought it was going to go a humor, like comical route at some point. And I
did like that character you're talking about who just like slept until she died because she didn't eat food or whatever. Yep. She's actually in the next combat arena, just dead in the corner over there. And you can see her.
Oh,
She's
really?
Just there.
No way.
It doesn't take itself too seriously, especially in the moments where Golem... We haven't really talked about Golem yet. He pulls out like a Rubik's Cube and just starts playing with a Rubik's Cube where like, what? Where did you get that? What the heck?
I saw, I don't know how it took this long for us to bring up the Rubik's Cube, but
that really took me out of it, I admit, but I appreciate it for what it was. If it was trying to be like a deep cut, like, so the character Golem, you go to the edge of the world and he's like sleeping on a throne and your arrival wakens him up and he's a product of a long forgotten civilization. So if the Rubik's Cube was supposed to be a hint that like the long forgotten civilization was us, then okay, that would have been fun. But I don't think that's what it was. I think he just had a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah. It was like already solved. It was always one move away from being solved too. The Rubik's Cube.
But the cool thing about Golem that I really, really liked was
Lobster Crouch.
His magic power that is completely unexplained, completely not justified, but narratively it's set up and paid off, where when he hurts himself, the other people around him feel his pain. So at one point, the hunter is about to kill Gat, and up until this point, Gollum has just said, no, I'm not helping you in combat, and he's not given any reason for it. But then he steps in when the hunter's about to kill Gat, and he gets scratched across the chest, and then all of a sudden, everybody gets scratched across the chest. Like, wait, what? What just happened? And
that's cool.
It freaks the hunter out, so he runs away. And then at the very end of the game, when Father Mother is about to kill Gat again, because one of the biggest problems again with this game, love the world building, love the narrative structure, hate the actual storytelling, is they constantly have you lose in cutscenes. And even in the final boss fight, you're about to lose in a cutscene.
So
but right as Father Mother, super predictable. Father Mother's about to kill you, crush your skull, and then Gat or Golem breaks all of his fingers on his hand. And then everybody around him has their hand broken, and that's such a cool thing. Like magic powers are not in this universe. They're not. There's nothing in this that prepared you for this happening, but it fits into the narrative, and it just makes the character super cool, super unique, and super memorable.
I forgot that you fight Father Mother twice.
You fight him a couple times.
Identical fight, but the second time there's ads, like there's additional enemies.
And he's all like beat up and gross and bloody.
Yeah. What did you think about when you go to the end of the world and you have to, remember when you get so you get a new weapon when you're in the end of it's the end of the world, right? Where
the torch?
There are these, the torch, and you recharge the torch by hitting fires. And then you have a ranged attack, essentially, where you shoot a bubble thing. It's forward, and it pretty much one-shots any enemy it hits, I felt like. And
I feel like it was getting stronger as I played. Okay. Maybe I'm crazy, because in the beginning, I thought like it took like 3 hits to kill a thing, and by the end, it was definitely just like 1 hit, 1 kill.
Maybe it was like the more torches that were lit, how more strong it got, maybe? I don't know.
I don't know. It definitely is a cool concept, but it was the weakest feeling weapon, like from a visual standpoint. It was like weird and floaty and didn't...
Surprisingly weaker, that felt weaker than the pistols.
Yeah.
And it was the most repetitive, annoying weapon, in my opinion. Like,
yes,
there were just so many torches that you had to defend at some point. It was just like, ugh, just give me like one of them. You know what I mean?
that's one of the things that I really, really like about Xenoclash is how I agree with you on all of that. It was probably the least interesting gameplay experience, the least fun gun to shoot, if you can call it a gun. But think about all the unique things that happened in that one level.
Yeah.
You had torches that revealed poisonous fog. So like your path would be closed off and you'd have to light a torch to clear out the miasma to be able to get to the next area. You had two unique enemy types. You had statues that, I think they were called statues, that would like appear in groups up out of the sand and come try and punch you. But then you also had these like floating electrical jellyfish that you had to shoot at a distance. And then they also had a unique visual effect where just in one little segment, as you're walking around, stones would lift up out of the ground to reveal a pathway. And so it was kind of like a maze that you had to find your way through the floating stones. And it's like, for one short little level, that's kind of a lot going on.
I really liked that portion of the game. I think it was just the part where you had to light the candles and defend them.
It was a cool little segment, and it didn't overstay its welcome. It wasn't the most engaging part of the game, but it did do, I think, maybe narratively speaking, a good job of making the end of the world feel different and special and weird in a way where like you're getting away from civilization. This is where the magic lives. Mm-hmm. And if you keep going in this direction, you're just gonna fall off the edge of the world into a void of crazy nonsense.
I appreciated it, and I like when games switch it up and give you something visually that's different. You went away from the brown, crusty world, and you were in this cool, dark, mysterious, foggy, magical zone, which was really cool. And you didn't know where you were going, and you just figured it out along the way.
Did you like the boat ride?
I thought that was awesome. And what I really liked about that, it was either on the boat ride or after. Deidre and Golem had a little dialogue bit where they were talking about Gat. It might have been right after or before, but it's cool when you can overhear a conversation that's happening about the player. It's just, I really like that.
It makes a world instantly feel more alive, and it makes characters feel more real. And it's such a low hanging fruit, such a low effort thing to put into your game, but it does feel really cool.
It makes you just care more, I think.
Yeah, especially given the context of how, I don't want to say shallow, but how simple the characters are. Maybe simple but nuanced, question mark, of who Gat and Deidre and Gollum are and what they represent to the story. It's a 3.5 hour video game. It's not very long. So, and there's not too much opportunity for dialogue. So making some of the limited dialogue come in different formats like that really does go a long way.
What did you feel about Gat having a secret and you play as Gat? It kind of, like, you're playing as the character and you have a secret that you don't even know.
I don't mind that. To me, it's, I was just having a conversation with Eric, our guest from the last episode, in the context of open world games, where when I play Skyrim, I'm playing as me.
Yep.
I'm me, and I'm going around and I'm making decisions that I would make, and I'm talking to people using the dialogue options that I would choose. And so in those games, I have an expectation that the game is going to honor my wishes, compared to a game like Cyberpunk, where I don't feel like I'm playing me when I play Cyberpunk. Yeah. I'm playing as V, and V, I honestly don't really like V. He's not a very likable character for me, and honestly, none of the NPCs in Cyberpunk are very likable to me. I don't really like Pan Am. I don't really like Judy. I'm not even personally very attached to Jackie. And, that can be a video essay for another time. But it still works for me in Cyberpunk because I'm not playing as me. I'm playing as V. I'm playing as this imperfect character in this imperfect world filled with imperfect people with their own flaws. And that kind of makes it feel deeper, more nuanced, more like I'm really a part of this world in a way that I don't otherwise get. So like when I'm playing Zeno Clash, despite the fact that it's a very shallow game, I don't feel like I'm playing as me. I am playing as Gat, and I'm role-playing as Gat, and I would make the decisions that Gat would make. And just like in Cyberpunk, I feel like I don't need the game to honor my wishes as much because I'm not playing as me, I'm playing as V, and I would make the decisions that V would make. And even if I don't feel a direct attachment to Jackie, I can still relate to V and understand that, all right, this is the part where I would make a decision where V would want to honor Jackie because V cares about Jackie, even if I personally don't.
Two total different types of experiences. Like I'm thinking about Final Fantasy X, right? When I think of Final Fantasy X, I'm thinking about the Final Fantasy X story. And they do a good job because Titus, or the character you embody, knows as much about the world as you do. So you journey along as Titus and learn with Titus. I have a lot more trouble with games where you're already in it. You're playing a character that knows a lot more than you do. And it's difficult for me to, I get frustrated a little bit. And I got a little frustrated, but
how about The Witcher? Because to me that's a game where I think a lot of people started playing The Witcher either at the time of The Witcher 2 or The Witcher 3. Have you played The Witcher games?
Not enough. And I think that's why I sometimes lose patience with like others, like stories. Like it's like I don't know.
That's very much a game where, especially if you started playing in The Witcher 3, Geralt knows a lot about the characters, about the world, and about his own backstory that you as the player would not.
The Witcher 1, actually. Correct.
Okay. All right, then that's not a great example for you here.
But that goes kind of like to that concept that I think I've talked with you about in the past. Like when you're writing a book, you can be very, very detailed and very, very specific and write down every detail in the scene, and you don't leave much room for your reader's imagination. Right? Where as you're writing, an approach I take is it's not so much what you write, but what you don't write. It's you're a chaperone kind of setting the scene, but you weaponize your reader's imagination. You let them do the hard work. When you give them room in a story, when you give them a little bit of space, a good example is we talked about my roleplay experiences in the past, how I would be on roleplay servers. And if you were to ask me about a scenario in one of my roleplay servers, I could tell you like enough things where you would think I would be explaining a feature film. It would sound so grand and epic. And then you go look at the game I was playing, and it's the most pitiful, low poly thing ever. But my imagination broadened that experience so much, and it made it so much more personal to me. So I tend to like those games that give you room to breathe, give you room to imagine and role play.
Yeah. Would you say Xenoclash does that well or poorly?
I don't think it does it at all.
For me, I would say Xenoclash does that spectacularly with the world building. Like, it doesn't give you very much. It doesn't tell you the politics of this world, really. It doesn't tell you the currencies. It doesn't tell you the manufacturing processes. It doesn't give you any of that stuff. It's just like, here's the guys. This is what they're doing. Go.
and I don't think it's that type of game. Like I can still,
Sure.
I love it. It's not a Skyrim. Like it's not that type of game, but I still love the game.
All right. Are there any other components, any other highlights that you want to talk about with your experience playing?
Don't think so. I think we covered pretty much everything. Is there any? I guess my question to you is, what was your favorite engagement? What was your favorite moment? What was your favorite memorable thing, fight or encounter?
I think I liked fighting that first. Oh, actually, here's a question. Before I get to that.
Yep.
What's up with the boulders?
What do you mean?
The boulders. There's certain fights with big boulders. Typically when there's a big boy, when there's one of the tough boys.
Oh.
And around the environment there's boulders. And like he can knock the boulders and they'll roll a little bit. What's with those?
I remember that.
What did they do? Why are they there? I kept feeling like there was like a puzzle I was trying to solve, whether I'm trying to get the boulder in a hole or I'm trying to use the boulder to knock it into him or something.
I thought it was, so those big, you fight big enemies during that, right? And they charge.
Yeah.
I thought that you could use it to if you put a boulder between you and a charging enemy, I can't remember if that stopped the charge when the enemy hit it.
Well, it does, but he hits the boulder into you and then the boulder hurts you. So
and it hurts you, right? Does it?
Yeah.
So that's why. I think that's the purpose of it, just to add that element.
What difference does it make if the boulder hits me and damages me, or if he was to continue running and hit me and damage me? It's the same thing.
Yeah, guess you're right.
I kept trying, because at some point there were ads during those fights, so I thought like, oh, maybe if I get him to hit the boulder into an ad, then that'll do like something cool or like crazy damage or something. But I never managed to make the boulders useful. They were always just me taking extra damage for no reason, trying to figure something out that I don't know was there.
You know, I'll keep an eye out when we play Xenoclash 2 for the boulders.
So if you want to figure out the secret of the boulders, make sure you stick around for future episodes of Imaginary Game Studios. I am seeing excerpts of a comic in the Xenoclash world, which I would be super interested in reading, because maybe that does a better job of giving some of these characters a little bit more depth and interest, like Remat, like the sister that is constantly chasing after you. I'm looking at an excerpt here where she's having a conversation with the hunter, so I'd love to see a little bit more interaction between some of those different characters. Other than that, I mean, I really like the guy who had to walk in a straight line.
Yep.
Even though you never fight him, because he does a really good job of, like, one of the ways they used him was, we were talking about how the levels are very small and in some cases can feel restrictive. And one of the levels when you're in the forest, you see him walking across the level, but he ignores the limits of the level. And so you see him walk from outside the level, across the level, and back out of the level, which is just a cute little way to make the level feel bigger than it is, because other characters can interact with the exterior version and don't have to obey the same limits that you by technical definition have to. I don't know. I thought that was cute, but
that was memorable. I remember that.
Otherwise, my favorite encounter would probably have been. I did like the fight scenes in the little alleyways in Hallstadam. The boss fight, unfortunately, was not super memorable for me, because even though throughout the rest of the game I tried to do a really good job with using the different weapons, the boss fight in particular devolved into me just shooting him with the fish guns over and over again. And there was this whole mechanic where you could shoot the legs out to knock him down, but that was just introducing more danger, because I got into a pattern where I could just shoot, dash away, reload, dash away, shoot, and rinse and repeat, and I never had to knock him down, and I was able to kill him the whole way. So that was a little bit of a shame.
So I in the last fight, in the first father-mother fight, I agree with you, but in the second one, when they added the additional enemy to the fight, that's when I started taking out the boss's ankles
Okay.
deal with the ad, and then switch back to the boss. So whenever the boss was up, I'd take out his ankles and kill the ad.
I see. That's
it's
good.
a little
That's clever.
strategy I got there. Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, my favorite encounter, just because if it wasn't apparent and how much I have a strong disdain for sewer levels, was just fighting that plant down in the sewers.
That was cool.
It's the shortest part of the game, but I mean, they put a lot of effort into just that one little 2-minute segment. That was great. I love that.
My favorite was when you were in the forest and there was a very windy path that could branch off in multiple directions and circle back on itself. And you had two factions that you were fighting.
Yeah.
And they were fighting each other.
That's the one in the reeds, right?
Yes.
And there's like a lot of fog. Yeah. That was a good fight.
That was one of my favorites. Cool.
There was another Corwood fight where I forget what his name was. You're fighting against a guy who beats a drum. And that's his thing, is that he plays music, and whenever he plays music, it activates the heart of all the Corwoods and makes them hungry for combat. And I really like the narrative framing of that, where it's like, we could just go around. We could just ignore this. Like, all those crazy people are just partying over there. But Gat is a Corwood, so he hears it and he's like, no. I gotta go in. I can't. I'm sorry. I have to now. And that was clever.
It's an awesome game.
It's very cool. So the last thing I want to chat to you about is the dev perspective. So as a game developer, what are your thoughts on how this game was constructed?
I thought the game was awesome. I think knowing the source having dealt with the source engine in the past, I know how difficult it is. And I was very surprised that they broke away. If they didn't have the menus, if they didn't have the sound effects, I would not have guessed it was a source engine game.
Yeah.
And so technically, I was very impressed. The ragdolls, the AI, everything, those are the things I'll be remembering from this game, and might influence things I would want to do. And it just gave me a different perspective.
So I'll tell you, the game that this most reminded me of is a game that you're very familiar with. It's a little game called Long Arm of the Law. This feels like a student game. I don't actually know the story behind Ace Team, but it feels like a student game. And I don't mean that in an insulting way, because part of what makes it great is how unapologetic it is and how it doesn't feel the need to tutorialize the story and all those wonderful things that make this game what it is. But there's a very economical use of assets. So you go through the world once and you get to the end of the world, and then you go back through the world again to go back to the city. So every location that you go to, most locations that you go to twice, and then they sprinkle in those little magical special segments like the sewer level and the boat ride to help differentiate them. And even when you go to each of those different levels more than once, or those environments more than once, it might have a different layout, or there might be different effects or different enemies that you fight in them to help keep it fresh. But again, like we've talked about with the levels, they make a really good, I think, use of the space to make a small area not feel super small. And you can go back to these same levels more than once, and it feels different every time you go through it. I don't know, did you get any student game vibes when you were playing this?
100%. I thought it was either a student game or like a conglomerate of like remote people working on it together. I don't know how or who pitched this game to the other people to get them on board, but in the credits, like, there's a lot of people that worked on this game, and there was one writer, if you saw, like,
okay.
I just want to know the inspiration for the story. I'm just curious, like, how they came up with this. Is this a bat? They were sick and they had a fever dream and they woke up, and like I'm just curious how they came up with this.
Yeah, because like I said, all of the inspirations that come to mind that it feels like this draws from came out after this came out. So.
Yeah, I don't know if I said this earlier. Like, I was trying to guess what year the game came out, and I was like, my first thing I said was I think 2011 was my first guess. And I was so surprised when I saw it was 2008.
Yeah. That's really good for a game that old. And it's even, like you said, there's enough grease on the wheels that still makes it feel good today. There's enough that little camera tricks and combat mechanics that and the AI especially. The AI was the highlight of this game, 110% for me. That and the world.
Yep.
That really still makes it fun to play today. That doesn't make it feel especially dated.
Props as well to the bountiful cutscenes and animations that they did in camera work. Some of the cutscenes were impressive. They seemed very choreographed, like just talk to each other and then the camera will tilt over and reveal the enemies. It was just really clever and cool. The amount of cutscenes and the animations were pretty good.
Yeah. The cutscenes probably are one of the few components of this game that you could point at that really makes it feel dated, just because modern games blow 99% of their budget on making pretty cutscenes, and then they remember they have to make a video game in between them. And so this game doesn't have the crazy cinematography and the crazy lighting, and it doesn't have the post-processing effects that you might see in a modern game, but it does tell the story in a satisfying way. All right. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap this up?
No. If you have a Steam account, you have $10, you're bored, you're sick, something's not right, you want to get into a weird experience and feel like you were sick, then play this game, Zeno Clash.
Yeah, and to be clear, this is Imaginary Game Studios, not affiliated with Ace Team in any way. It's just a fun game.
Yeah, just a fun game, a unique experience, and I highly recommend it. If not for the story, for the gameplay.
Yeah, it's a good beat 'em up, and one that I'm not going to forget anytime soon, especially if we're going to be playing Xenoclash 2 later this year. But that is not the game that we're going to be playing next month. Are you ready for this? The game that we're playing next month on the Imaginary Game Club is Banjo-Kazooie, The Jiggies of Time.
Nice. It's classic.
This is not your mom's Banjo-Kazooie. This is Banjo-Kazooie, The Jiggies of Time. It's a Banjo-Kazooie mod set in the world of Zelda Ocarina of Time.
That sounds amazing.
It has 9 worlds, 100 jiggies, 900 notes, 5 mumbo transformations, and a lot of Easter eggs. So I'm just looking at...
Does it have
it's
jiggy physics?
I don't know how some of these different ROM hacks are made of these games, but it definitely caught my interest because, I mean, Banjo-Kazooie, Ocarina of Time, these are some of the most classic games of the industry, and I'd love to go back and revisit both of them, so why not just do it at the same time?
Brilliant.
So I hope you'll be joining us in our adventures to play through Jiggies of Time next month, Jack. Thanks so much for joining me in our discussion. I look forward to playing through the sequel sometime in a future episode.
Thanks for having me. I love the Imaginary Game Club. It's small games, so you can play them within a couple sittings, and it's a ton of fun. It's like a book club for games, and I like how we get to hear you talk about it afterwards. So I'm excited for Jiggies of Time.
Look at that! I even got my guests pitching the marketing spiel for me. Excellent.
But no, this was a ton of fun. Thanks, and looking forward to Xenoclash 2.
Great. And as always, this episode is brought to you by Imaginary Game Studios, the developer of Meticulous, a gamified health companion on Steam. If you're looking to honor those New Year's resolutions for 2024, make this year your year, put all of your systems video game skills to use instead of leveling up a video game character. Level up your own gosh darn self. You deserve it, you champion. And check out Meticulous on Steam. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Imaginary Game Club. Again, if you want to be a participant in the club yourself, make sure you head to imaginarygamestudios.com, click on the link to join the Discord server up at the top of the page, and keep up to date with the next titles that we'll be playing on the Imaginary Game Club, and as well as any other cool game development stuff that I'm working on. Thanks again, Jack. Until next time.
Later, guys.
This is Kext. Signing off.
Thank you.